Welcome, everybody. Seid begrüßt. Shalom Aleichem. My name is Vivian Felsen, and on behalf of the Committee for the Toronto UJA Committee for Yiddish, I would like to welcome you here to our program today. Our guest speaker, as you know, is Diana Matut in Germany, and we're going to have a really interesting multimedia program for you today. So we're going to start with Miri Corral, whom we are partnering with again from the California Institute of Yiddish Language and Culture in Los Angeles. And she is going to formally introduce our guest speaker that we're very happy to have with us today, Diana Matut. Miri.
Herzlichen Dank, Vivian. Thank you so much. Seid begrüßt, everyone. Welcome, everyone. So great to have you with us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are in this country, in the world. Wonderful to have you here with us today. I also want to say very quickly that this program could not take place without the enthusiasm and involvement in so many ways of Vivian Felsen, who you just met on screen, and Sharon Power, who is behind the scenes running this webinar. So thank you so much to them and to the UJA Committee for Yiddish in Toronto. I also just want to mention that we are having another co-sponsorship, another program coming up in January with Shmuel Kassoff, Sam Kassow, giving us an interesting take on his recently new translation of Rochel Auerbach's memoirs. And we're looking forward to that very much, January 25th. Es ist mein größten Vergnügen. It's really my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Diana Matut. Today, there's so much to tell you about her, but I will try to keep it brief so she can have the floor as long as possible today. By the way, we hope to keep this within the hour, but we may go over a little bit. There will be Q&A after Diana speaks, so at any time you can write that in, actually, if you have questions along the way, but we will not respond to them until after her talk. So Dr. Diana Matut teaches Jewish studies, Yiddish, and Jewish music at the University Halle-Wittenberg in Germany, and the Oxford Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies, which of course, as you know, is in Oxford, England. Diana earned her diploma in Hebrew and Jewish Studies in 1999 in Oxford, followed by an MA in Yiddish Studies in 2001 in London. And also she did an advanced seminar for Yiddish Studies at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, which was taught exclusively in Yiddish. She was the Joseph Kremen Memorial Fellow in East European Jewish Arts, Music and Theater at YIVO, and the Visiting Fellow at the Oxford Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies in both 2011-12 and 2019 and 20. She convened the Oxford Seminar in Advanced Jewish Studies in 2020-2021 and led a research group focusing on Jewish musical cultures in Europe, 1500 to 1750. In 2021, she was awarded a fellowship, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it quite right, the Mare maybe, or Mer Baltikum Fellowship at the University of Rostock, Germany. She has taught in universities in Canada, the Czech Republic, Israel, Italy, the UK, the USA, and several Jewish cultural festivals and intensive programs such as the Yiddish Summer Weimar, Klez Canada, Klez Fest London, and the Maison de la Culture in Yiddish in Paris. Together with the American composer Alan Burr, Diana produced a CD which rediscovered Yiddish children's songs, Fer dem Nayem Dor, for the new generation. And in 2017, she conducted the Young Kadya's Choir, a German-Israeli project with new settings by Alan Byrne for the poetry of Kadya Molodowsky. The project documentary under the same title, Young Kadya's Choir, was in cinemas in autumn of 2022. That year also saw the premiere of Glickel Oratoria, an oratorio centering on the life of the famous Yiddish memoirist Glickel of Hameln. And Diana wrote the libretto in 4 languages, Western and Eastern Yiddish, German, and English, representing Glickel and 3 women from different times who give voice to Glickel's experience for our times. And directly related to the talk today, in 2019, Diana, together with the American composer, arranger Josh Horowitz, led the Henech Kon project, which brought the only surviving pre-war Yiddish opera, Basheva, from Europe back on stage, and we will hear more of that. And what's not mentioned here is that she's also a musician, and she has the most beautiful angelic voice, um, and is a specialist in early Jewish music. So it's really with such great pleasure that I turn this over to Dr. Diana Matut.
Dank Miri. Tayroyle mich schon vergessen, sie ist mit Geräusch vergnügen, als ich habe im Covid eigentlich mit Kabel Punum zusammen. Es ist mir ein Schott, aber man hat mich gebeten zu geben der Lektion auf Englisch und das will ich tun. Yeah, dear guests, it's an absolute honor to be here today. Thank you for joining this session, and I was asked to deliver this lesson in English, so that's what I'm gonna do. I would have loved to give it in Yiddish, but there we are. Next time, I hope. So let's delve right into it. Let me share my screen with you, and then let's get started. So, if you have any issues hearing what I'm playing, or if anything doesn't go according to plan, please give me a shout because I can't see your faces, and unfortunately. So, Henech Kon and the infinite prowess of Yiddish music. I have to say that to a certain degree I've been involved with studying Henech Kon and his just really tremendous oeuvre since many years. However, I would really need a longer period of study time to really write about him in a more substantial manner because just his worker's life until now is really under-researched, and it really needs I think a monograph very soon. So let's delve right into the period we are talking about. So in 1935, we have this concept of the secular Yiddish land, the Yiddish land that is a country without borders, but a country of culture and language, with like the portable home being the language and literature of its people, defined beautifully in Schneiderman's article, Die antifaschistische Tendenzen in der jiddischen Literatur. So, colleagues and friends, speaking to you as a citizen of the land of Yiddish, a land without barracks and armies, a land where the pen is the sole weapon. You will not find this land on any world map. The borders of this land are marked only by its cultural achievements and arduous creative work. The citizen of this Yiddish land is a citizen of the world. And Melech Ravitch, in his famous work Mein Lexikon, wrote in the same vein about the musical activities and the secularism of this pre-war time. Maybe for the first time since all Jewish eternities, a complete structure of intellectual Jewish secularism was built consciously. We have built a secular school, a secular theater, a press, a literature, Jewish arts, and we also challenged ourselves in the field of secular Jewish music. And our Henech Kon was truly destined for this. So here we see Melech Ravitch referencing Henech Kon as being really the secular Jewish composer, Jewish musician par excellence. So this is a very, very fascinating quote, I find. So Kon was born and raised by his parents and grandparents, going back and forth between Łódź and Kudne, and came from a Hasidic family. However, it was a Hasidic family that was relatively well-to-do and open to musical activities in the area. So it was not a Hasidic community that we must imagine as being, really completely closed. So he experienced musical forms, musical languages inside the Hasidic communities, but also outside the communities by way of traveling musicians, towns, musics that were played in the streets on occasions that he references to. He came to Berlin and probably stayed there until 1912. He was pretty young still, a music student. However, until now, we can't prove where exactly he studied. So you must imagine Berlin at the time had really very many musical colleges to boast. So the Royal Academy for Music was, of course, the most prestigious one, die Königliche Musikhochschule. However, until now, I couldn't find his name among the list of students there. But at that time, let's just, remember who was teaching composition in Berlin at the time. We had people like the famous Max Bruch, Arnold Schönberg, and so on. So those were, the composers being active at the music colleges, especially, the Royal College for Music in Berlin at the time. But of course, Berlin at that period was really a fantastic place to be if you wanted to engage with, classical musics, the musics that were written by the contemporary composers. It was just an incredible place to be if you wanted to study composition, if you wanted to hear really excellent musicians. So I've mentioned briefly that Henech Kon came from a Hasidic family, and of course, if we study his work, nigunim play an incredibly important part in his oeuvre. So nigunim are something that we see like right from the start, but really up into, the 50s when he was still composing. They are always there as single pieces that he composed, as pieces that he intertwined with longer compositions, or of course as part of the scores he wrote for films and theater. I guess you are all very, very familiar with the film The Dybbuk. Now, in the Dybbuk, we have, I hope you can see my screen with the film now, we have nigunim that he composed and set to harmony and orchestrated very much in a folksy style, very much in the style of, traditional musics. And this is very typical for Henech Kon, that he wrote in the style of XYZ, that he knew from folk traditions. And this is a very, very good example. It's a dveikes niggin, a certain kind of niggin, beside, for instance, the tischnigen or other kinds of nigonim that we know very much, very deeply steeped in Kabbalah, with this idea of the soul reaching the highest heights, clinging to the light, and so on. So all of that is, part of the Dweikesnigen tradition. Hope you can hear. And so on and so forth. Very famous music indeed. And Melech Ravitch said about Henech Kon, also again in my lexicon, he wrinkles his gaunt forehead and remembers Nigunim. He remembers Nigunim all the time. And the photograph you see on the right-hand side is one of those very, very few images that we have of Henech Kon. Other publications that you see here, like in Kinderfreund von Warsaw, der musikalische Bibliothek, we have a Kishevnigen by, you see here on the left-hand side, music by Henech Kon. Or we have these tremendously beautiful publications that I can only very warmly recommend you to take a look at, because it's a wonderful, wonderful merging of beautiful art by Isaac Lichtenstein or Isaac Lichtenstein, and the compositions by Henech Kon, and those are all nigunim. And you can still buy these publications. They have also been digitized, and they're really fantastic. So if you want to discover more of Kon's nigunim, if you want to sing his nigunim, perform his nigunim, or bring them back to your communities, then I would really suggest you take a look at those editions. Kon and folk music. So here we have Yisrael Rabinovich, of Jewish art, of Jewish music, ancient and modern, who said, although all the melodies by Kon are of folk style, they are still not mere copies of traditional, but are distinguished by an unmistakable individuality. Of Henech Kon's music, it may be said that, although written in the style of folk, it is never hackneyed, and that's really a very, very apt description of Henech Kon's oeuvre and his Nikonim style and his folk style, that he is really steeped in the tradition. He takes the musical languages of the tradition, but he can also transform them into something meant for an audience of the early 20th century. And Weichert, in his Zichronis, his memoirs, published in 1960, said, "Another time I met a Jewish wedding party. The klezmorim played quietly, Chusenkalle Mazel Tov. The melody stuck in my head, and many years later I gave it to the composer Henech Kon and asked him to weave it into the music for my production of Sholem Asch's Kiddush Hashem." And this is something we see. So Henech Kon wrote the music for several theater plays, and among them Kiddush Hashem, but also several works by Peretz Markish. You will know many, many songs by Henech Kon without realizing that you know songs by Henech Kon, because some of them are incredibly famous. As for instance, we are not gonna get to that today. We don't have enough time. As for instance, Shpil lidele of Yiddish. So that's his music as well. But also the Batchen, which has been set to music in a very, very artsy way. So what Henech Kon did here was, so he used this famous poem by Itzik Manger, but the way he set it to music is really in an art music style, just, as we know him, this from the school of Jewish music in St. Petersburg and other places. So if you listen to that, this is really art song of the early 20th century in its finest moment.
O sitzt du die Kalle, schön wie der Tag, nur was dort der Fiedel sagt Fiedele sagt. Die Schönheit ist schön, nur Schönheit vergeht. Was soll sagt der Fiedel und was sagt die Flöte? So sagt der Fiedel und was sagt die Flöte? A Schotten das Leben, a Schotten das Glück, a Schotten vergeht und es kommt nie zurück. A so redet Bad.
And so on and so on and so forth. Really beautiful rendering. Between 1922 and 1940, you could say that Henech Kon really traveled the length and width of Europe. So he was on tour quite a bit between Warsaw, Łódź, and really several places in Europe. And part of this traveling and touring was his collaboration with Yitzchok Leibush Peretz. And Peretz wrote to Kon, "Ob du wirst es nicht machen, wird es keiner nicht machen." And I think that's, the most spectacular compliment, I guess, that you could get from someone like Yitzchok Leibush Peretz, really saying, if you are not going to do it, nobody's going to do it, and really entrusting him with the musical setting for his theater pieces, especially by Nacht auf den Alten Markt. His collaboration with Moshe Broderson, of course, was really the most fruitful one could possibly imagine. And it's being said that, it's the musical poet Moshe Broderson meeting the poetical musician Henech Kon. And if you just, look at what those two have produced in the course of about 18, 20 years, it's breathtaking. They've staged an incredible amount of performances, kleynkunst, theater together. It was really a match made in heaven, um, including, famous troops, famous theater productions that, still are very, very much on the forefront of our thinking if you think about the secular theater world before World War II. And again, Melech Ravitch on Henech Kon. And as soon as young Yiddish started in Łódź and later the Chaliastre in Warsaw, and composers and musicians were needed everywhere, Henech Kon took this role upon himself out of love. In this field, he had almost no rivals, and maybe he was truly unrivaled. And because Henech Kon had Yiddish as a base, he had a Yiddish style as well. And he was drawn to Moshe Broderson, the musical poet. So this is Ravitch again engaging with the history of this tremendous collaboration. And here we see a title page or program, I'm sorry, from the first program of Azazel. And we see here uh, Musikleitung Henech Kon here on the left-hand side. So this is really Kon being there right from the start when Azazel took flight. And this is the program again, and really very many um, pieces being written, like the Chemchazen by Henech Kon. Yeah, to give you just a tiny little a tiny little taste of what, that music was like. Again, very different. So we've already covered a bit of his Nikunim styles. We've listened to a bit from his from his art song oeuvre, which is tremendous and huge, by the way. It's really hundreds of songs that he set to music. It's fantastic. And here we have a song that I'm sure several of you have heard before, which really comes from the revue theater sphere in Warsaw and Poland before the war. An Eitzel dem Wasserträger.
A bucher in die Jugend, noch ein Jung, bin ich Ich bin a Bucher, ich bin a Bucher, ich bin a Bucher, Wenn an Nächste geben, dir an Nächste will ich geben, nimm Arbeit die Bucher werd ihr wollt ihr leben. Mit seiner Kasene, mit seiner Kasene, mit seiner Kasene,
We have so little time, so I'd like to continue already. Yeah, so this, of course, will be a centerpiece of what I am presenting to you today. So we always have to say as far as we know, but as far as we know, Henech Kon was indeed the first one to write a Yiddish opera. I'm happy to stand corrected, and I'm sure there is more to discover. But as far as we know, it is also the only surviving pre-war opera from Europe. But again, also there, I am very happy to stand corrected. What are we looking at? So, Bassheve, here you see the title page, which so the piano score of Bassheve is to be found at the Yale University Library, and you can just download the entire score, the piano score, from the University Library's website. It's really available, and it's, as you can see, it's really beautifully decorated. That's all hand painted and decorated and handwritten. And you see here Bassheve, you see here, of course, David und Bassheve, and you see here Opere von Henech Kon. And this is, and the libretto by Broderson. So, and this is what we are looking at. So this is the very first page of the score, of the piano score. And you see it's Bassheve, it says here, and then Erster Akt. And the music is actually written from left to right. So Kohn used a transcription of Yiddish. He didn't write the Yiddish text in Yiddish letters, but he used a Latin script transcription. And there's also something else that you see here. So Aranfir and Andante. And you see that it is only piano, but he always gave indications as to which instruments he had in mind. So what we know is that Cohn wanted to have this performed or thought of this as being an orchestra piece. However, and we'll come to that in a second, there really wasn't enough financial support for this work back in the time. So they had no other choice but to perform it with piano only. So there were no other instruments involved, and they even did not have enough singers in Warsaw for the first performance. Now remember, it was a time when, it was really about um, finding, the money to put it on stage in a full orchestra version, but also finding singers who were classically trained opera singers who could sing such roles with ease and speak Yiddish. So that was a bit of an issue. So there were several issues involved. So long story short, Henech Kon also had to sing the bass during the performance, and we'll come back to that. And here's another part of the score. You see a part of the choir section here, and you can see everything in transcription of the Yiddish text. And you see it's very beautifully done. We have here a part we're going to listen to later in Blaue Tiefe Malchus Nacht. And we see how the bass line is very, very stable in dotted quarter notes, and we have a very moving lullaby like 6/8 in the upper parts. This is the Schnur choir in Warsaw. So the Schnur choir was a non-professional choir, and the Schnur choir studied the Bassheve choir parts and performed them during the performances. Again, a non-professional choir of dedicated semi-professionals and lay singers, but a very, very famous one in its time. So the Schnur choir was really like very much ingrained into the musical life of Warsaw before the war. And this is, and I'm happy to show this to you, I'm very proud. I have to thank the Madame Center in Paris for providing me with this image. Without them, I might not have found it. And you see here, this is Moshe Broderson, ausgeklebene Schriften. And this is, as far as I know, the only existing image of the Bassheve performance that we see, that we have. So you see here, it says that this is indeed Bassheve, and we singing Aviklied, and this is this famous song from the opera Fliet er Vogel fliet und flattert. And it's interesting, so we have different descriptions of the opera being performed in Warsaw, and we have different evaluations of this event. So Alter Katzisne in the Literarische Blätter Nummer 3, 1924 said, he, Henech Kon, dared to speak to us in a Yiddish sound language, and here and there, this language reached a great purity of expression. So again, the secularity and the Yiddish music. And Ravitch again said, and once around 1925, that's a mistake, Henech Kon, Moshe Broderson, and David Herman, the director of the Dybbuk, Moshe Rudnov, the baritone, and Rochel Levias, his wife, the singer, conspired, and they didn't tell anybody for a long time that they were preparing nothing less than a Yiddish opera. And one fine evening, it actually happened at the Kaminsky Theater, and since we had only a few trained singers in Warsaw, the composer himself took on a role, and only then did we become aware of the fact that he had a strong and trained bass voice. The opera, didn't last for long. And Vater, I don't know if you know this really, really famous work of his, Jiddische Musik in Polen zwischen beide Weltmilchomes, which is like one of the standard works on Yiddish music between the two world wars in Poland, said about Basheva, the enormous project has called forth enthusiasm among the Jews of Warsaw. Every performance was transformed into a celebration of Jewish musical art. And that's quite a wonderful thing to say of Vater. Now, in comes our project, and of course, Josh Horowitz. So I could not have hoped for a better, more wonderful collaborator than Josh. It's really thanks to his own tremendous musical prowess that this has truly become, a work for the 21st century, because Josh Horowitz really had to face two major obstacles when taking on this role. And one was that, again, we only had the piano score, so Josh Horowitz really had to do the entire reworking as an orchestral version, and also working with the instruments we had, and not necessarily with everything he imagined or would have loved to have at that very moment. And the other major issue was that, like, the climax, so to say, of the opera was actually missing. So the piano score, as we see it in the Yale University Library, has parts missing. So what do you do? And I think it was a genius idea to have Michael Wex write the missing parts, the missing pieces. And then what Josh Horowitz did was he did not compose for those like new parts that were added to fill in what was missing in the original, in the style of Henech Kon, which Josh Horowitz could have done easily. I mean, he's such a prolific, composer and arranger. But what he chose to do, and I think it was, just marvelous, was to give it really a musical language of the 21st century. And so, the new Bassheve really has become a Jewish interaction spanning several decades, really spanning, continents and times and Jewish musics, but it's all Jewish music, and it's a fantastic handshake over the course of decades. All right, and let's listen to this.
Alors le projet consiste à monter pour la première fois la version orchestrée de l'opéra Wascheve, qui a été composé en 1924 par Henech Kon, qui a été, je crois, créé à Varsovie, mais dans une version pour piano. Et donc c'est la première fois que nous avons là une version orchestrée par Joshua Horowitz.
We are working with a material that has actually never been performed with full orchestra.
De thema van de opera David und Bathsheba is a harbe in der jiddischer Welt. Gewen schwer für Deures zu machen Showen mit den Image von König David, scheint dit der größer König, aber von der zweiten Guckwinkel euch nehmen Bathsheba und so hargen im Übrigen. Das ist nicht gewen a Pushete Meise.
When I first got the score for this, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a difficult project. There were 16 pages missing in the manuscript that I was sent, and thankfully, those 16 pages formed the climax of the opera. You know, that which was missing was the best part of the opera, so it was the most fun that I was able to compose. There's lots of different ways I could have gone about this. And Diana Matut mentioned a very nice idea that historical paintings, say, in a museum that has been damaged, when it's restored, often will be restored with the intent of having that restoration be visible as a restoration. So there are basically these three kind of high romantic, Yiddish, and Baroque that he kind of weaves together. So when I was asked to compose it, I decided to kind of add a fourth style, but using the materials that I gleaned from other works of Kon. That made my connection to him then solid, but the style was not so. And I felt also that in that part of the work, it needed more drama than it actually had up to that point.
For me, it's about being together with others, and probably this is the best thing that we can make. Friendships.
Komm rein,
This orchestra is called the Triangle Orchestra, and it's made up of people who are on the professional track in Poland, France, and Germany.
And we all speak one language, music language.
We put them all together in one room and rehearse the heck out of it.
It's a cultural mission of performing the only opera that was written before the war that survives in Yiddish.
So now that we have the possibility of doing super titles, there's no excuse for not doing Yiddish opera or theater.
Henech Kon hat gehabt Cholende zu spielen die Opera mit Instrumenten, mit einem Orchester, und sie haben das nicht gekannt. Schrecklich und schwer, und so lieb probend ist heraus von zu kochen. Und 95 Jahre später haben wir dem Kreuz das zu tun. Und von mir ist das, ja,
Okay. So apart from what you've just listened to, I just want to play like a tiny little snippet from the performance for you before we move on to a few other topics for 10 more minutes concerning Henech Kon. And what you are going to listen to here is a very, very nice piece of this wonderful opera where you hear the prophet and the choir. And so we have a moment where we see the prophet, in a way you could say, speaks truth to power. And the choir is a choir that celebrates the king's prowess, the king's might. And so we have a very interesting point in the opera where we have a double layer of someone who tries to, get a message of truth to power. And then we have those who just celebrate the power itself. And this is beautiful because this is the prophet telling the king that he has not done right by giving him a mashal, giving him a fable, so to say, and telling him, this you behaved like someone who has taken from a shepherd who only had like one sheep that he loved, and you took that one sheep, and this, of course, is Bathsheba, which the king has taken from Uriah. Okay. But let's continue. So Kon's star, so to say, was on the rise. So he had written this beautiful opera, and his music was performed not only in Europe, but long since in other places as well. Here is but one example, the Freylekhe Vagabond, being performed in San Jose with David Rechtzeit. And in the volume Jeden in der Musik by Henech Kon in 1940, he writes, "The light operetta is almost exclusively in Jewish hands. Oskar Strauss, Kalman, Leo Fall, Paul Abraham, Misha Spoljansky, the two Hollanders, Ralph Benatzky, Kurt Weill. More serious Yiddish opera music was written during the last years by Yosef Kaminska, the son of Esther Rochel Kaminska, music for Paritz's Bei Nacht auf den Alten Markt in the Warsaw performance by David Hermann, the Wilna Truppe, Henech Kon, opera David und Bathsheba, music for Kiddush Hashem der Goylem, and the Madam Sanatorium movie Mir kommen on. And this is really something we need to remember, that Henech Kon's music was really part and parcel of really the great film productions, Yiddish film productions before the war, and then also part of this very famous movie which was shot in 1948, Border Street. 1940, Kon was able to flee to the United States. And Vater said about that, Henech Kon was one of the pillars of the Yiddish theater in Poland and for small-scale performance arts in general. But when he came to America, he walked as if on a strange planet. And indeed, we can hardly imagine. So Henech Kon really did not find a good ground in the United States, musically, artistically, in terms of payment. So he was, one of so many who came at that time, and simply to survive for him was a tremendous struggle. And we read many dismissive things about him in that, during the time, that he kind of forced his music on people and really, like just brought a song along and urged singers to perform then for a performance at night. But if you just remember, he was really in dire straits, and he was really in such a tremendously difficult situation that he tried everything to simply survive in the climate of the of New York and of America during that period. What I discovered when I had a chance to work exclusively really with Henech Kon's archive in at YIVO was just how many beautiful art songs he made out of children's songs. So he really set them to music in a fantastic style. So we have the simpler versions which were written for like the Kindering and the Arbeitering. So something like that, the 10 Lieder von Henech Kon, Van Kindering, Sommer 1943. So those are really children's songs in, the truest sense. But then we have several like double LP albums, and this is one of those where we see that he wrote, took also existing children's songs and turned them into beautiful art songs by setting them to music. I mean, this is something you might not necessarily play for children today. They might be very irritated listening to these performances. But to us as, adults, maybe schooled in Western art song, it's simply beautiful. And let's listen to one example. Okay, we don't have much time left, so I think we should just finish up. This is some of the last 3 slides I want to present to you. If you just take a look at this, so this is another of Kon's brilliant performances, beautifully edited. This is Yossel Loksch von Chelm. Here you see his name, Henech Kon, and you see we have the poetry by Yankov Gladstein, of course, well known in these circles. I do not need to introduce him. And we have here Kon's musical rendering of this fantastic poetry by Gladstein. So the Yossel Loksch von Chelm also still awaits a re-performance. So this is also one of those pieces that we should really bring back to stage. And let me finish with two slides. So this is the first one of those two. I want to bring this to you because this is something that really brings or bridges also the gulf again to us, to the 21st century. Let's just briefly listen into Yossel Bear, poetry by Itzik Manger, music by Henech Kon, and here an adaptation by Den Khan and the Painted Bird.
Zappelwald. Yossel Bear. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hij zegt Josselbeer und ich dien in de militair. Ai, 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 ai. Stiefel draad, je gaat monteren, handelen wie aan de officieren. Ja, ai, 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 ai. Ja, ben ik als zuster jong, gelijk podes was met een zog. Ai, 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 ai. Maar dan weer een bik zo schwer, zuster, hij op in een treer. Ja, ai, 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 ai. Josselbeer, die dit militair. Jossel, Josselbeer. And I serve the military.
And so on and so forth. And let me finish with this quote from 1964 on the occasion of the 50th birthday of the Volksbühne, where Shepard wrote, "As befits a senior organization of the Yiddish theater in New York, it opened last night with a work based on the characters created in the time of Abram Goldfaden. Itzik Manger was woven into a new play with music by Henech Kon. The theme is about people who seek happiness by learning a haunting magic tune that will solve their problems. Some do, some don't. That's life." And I think that's a beautiful sentence, I think, to finish with when we are talking about one of the greatest melody writers and arrangers and composers of the first part of the 20th century. Thank you.
Thank you. A großen Dank. Thank you. That was fascinating. And I don't know if there are many questions in the Q&A box. Have you noticed, Miri?
But there are a few, yes.
There are a few. Okay, well, maybe we'll start with those. But I certainly have some questions that I would like to ask you that I'm very curious about. And especially his collaboration with Broderson. I didn't know that. I found that really interesting because I just had the privilege of translating Broderson's Siche Schooling that was just published this year. So anyway, I have a lot of questions, but let's see what we have in the Q&A, Kestel.
Yes. So one of the questions is from Jesse Kleiman was it common to have instrumental accompaniment for nigunim? Good question.
Yeah, so I think, Jesse, you're asking because of the first snippet that I showed from the Dybbuk, where we see the klezmorim standing in the background and playing while the Hasidim are singing. Now, there's a two-way to answer that. Now, of course, I mean, nigunim were traditionally speaking unaccompanied. You would only sing them on several occasions. However, they became also part of let's call it a klezmer reality. And of course, there's a strong connection between nigunim and klezmer music. And so what we see also pretty early on, so really documented from the 19th century, is that we have instances of nikunim and instrumental music, going hand in hand. Although this is not, again, this is not a traditional style of performing nikunim, and it isn't until now. I hope that answers the question. If not, give us another shout in the Q&A, please.
And Eliezer Nuborski asks about der Batchen. Wer singt? Weißt du? Wer singt?
You mean the one that is being
that you
presented from
played?
the Milken archive? The Batchen, yeah. Let me see. That is a very beautiful rendering. So that is Raphael Frieder, who is the baritone who sings. Shall I let me put this? Can I put something in the chat or in the F&A?
I think is that,
do that
can
now?
we turn the chat back on, Sharon?
You can put it in. You can put it in.
I could put it in here. I see that.
box.
Okay. Good. Okay.
And before we go any further, I want to mention, for those of you who may not have seen the last email that was sent this morning from the Yiddish Institute, that there will be a live performance of Basheva. In fact, Diana Matut is coming to Los Angeles for this purpose in April. April, I think 19th, yes? I think April 19th.
Yeah.
And I put a link for more information into the chat. Whether you are in town and would like to come see it, it's going to be an orchestral version, right? With voices and maybe a chorus as well. Yeah. If you want do you want to tell us something more about it?
I actually don't know much about it at this point, only that it is going to be a stage version again, but the full in full swing with orchestra and singers, yes, and choir.
Great. Okay, and another question. So someone mentioned that the music reminds her of this is Wendy Lebowski, reminds her of cantorial music. It's all interwoven, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, of course, that's with Henech Kon. First of all, that's not surprising, and also, if we remember just how closely intertwined klezmer music and cantorial music is as well, so that it's not only Henech Kon coming from a being traditionally schooled, coming from a traditional Hasidic background, but also this interaction of klezmer and cantorial musics. I think then that's not surprising. And actually, Josh Horowitz has written a fantastic article about that, how klezmer music and cantorial music are related.
And someone asked if Hebrew language opera. I'm sure there's much Hebrew language opera. If the question is between the wars, this I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there is, of course, there is modern Hebrew opera, of course, now in Tel Aviv. And there were, just, in the last 2 years, there were spectacular performances and spectacular presentations. There's a very interesting piece, for instance, on Herzl, which premiered a few years ago. Not as far as I know, there hasn't been any Hebrew opera between the wars.
And I know Vivian is dying to ask her questions, but just one quick question from me. So you mentioned that Henech Kon toured, yes, between the wars. He was touring around. What was he doing when he was touring? You mentioned also that he sang. Is that what he was doing when he was touring, or was he playing? What was he doing exactly on his tours?
Well, often he was musical director, especially for all the the kleynkunst that was going on. So he was responsible for putting all the music together, and that first of all could mean just choosing music, arranging music, playing piano, and from time to time singing. And sometimes he even recited, poetry and other, smaller forms. But it was it was quite a challenge. I mean, they were putting on so many shows and he was involved in so many activities. So he was producing really on a major scale in those days.
And you didn't mention where and when did he die? Or maybe I missed it.
Oh no, I didn't. I'm sorry. He died in 1973 in New York. And back then he lived together with a painter in extreme poverty. There's no other word for it. And most of his belongings weren't saved. So we've lost actually most of Henech Kon's letters and documents and even, I guess, most part of his compositions.
Vivian,
Yes.
we have a few
Yeah,
moments.
I did. You showed that beautiful the the um the libretto for the Basheva opera. Who is the artist? You didn't mention, you showed in the beautiful artwork, but you didn't
Yeah,
mention who the one.
it's as far as I know, it's both times it's Liechtenstein.
Okay. And I'm just curious to know whether you're in touch with Alex Weiser and who wrote the opera for the great dictionary of the Yiddish language. Have you had any contact with them?
I mean I know him of course, but yeah, I know him. I
So
mean
you
he's in
know
Evo, so
him
that's all good. Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
because it's the only other instance that I know of somebody that's working on a Yiddish opera.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I was very interested to know about his collaboration with Broderson, because I've just had the privilege of translating Broderson's Siches Schulen, which was just published this year, with the illustrations by Elisicki in Poland. And so I found that really interesting that that collaboration, because
Yeah.
he was such an amazing poet and an amazing person.
Yeah, I mean, and for many, many years, I mean, they were equally invested in, the theater performances, the Kleinkunst, dramatical, stagings, theater musics. There were so many levels of that collaboration, and for so many years between Broderson and Henech Kon, and they had so much mutual, really respect for each other and for their artistic prowess. It really shines through everything, when they reference each other. So it has been such a long-standing collaboration. They were touring together, they really created shows together, and Broderson really relied on Cohn to make his shows work musically, even in terms of dramaturgical questions, like where to put which music when and so on. So he trusted Cohn explicitly, and I think vice versa.
Was Cohen as well known among the masses, let's say,
Oh yeah, oh
as
yeah,
Broderson?
oh yeah. I mean, that's difficult to qualify. I mean,
But he was on
I
that same level of
Abs
it.
Absolutely. I mean, he was, and that's what makes it so, for me, sometimes so interesting. I think it's mainly because, so first of all, we often focus more on those who produced the words or on those who performed. So we often forget those who were writing the music itself. And then it's so many songs by Cole have become, we think of them as folk songs, which they aren't. And that's typical. So many songs that we consider folk do
Right.
have composers and do have authors. And then, they become part of common singing, they become part of, the common memory of people. And then you forget that they actually had an author and a composer. And with Kon's songs, that happened time and again. You know, we just forget that, oh, Shpil mir lidele, that's actually Henech Kon. You know the song, but you don't know him. And then again, you know, really because of the Holocaust, because of the Shoah, because of the war, we have this tremendous caesura. And Cohn, would certainly have been among, considered one of the great art composers of the 20th century. If not for the war, if not for that break in his career, and also in the awareness of him as a tremendous musical figure. And I think, it's really time, and we should really do, in essence, just imagine like an entire conference, an entire symposium, like really reperforming not only Basheva, but his art songs, his nigunim, bringing all of that tremendous musical oeuvre back to life. I mean, that would be an achievement.
Sounds wonderful. We are past our time already.
Yes, yes.
Interesting questions left, but maybe we will send them to you. And
Yes.
And yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much. It was a fascinating talk that you gave. And thank you very, very much on behalf
Yes,
of.
thank you. Hartstigen Dank, Diana. Ausgezeichnet. Ausgezeichnet. A großen Shikoyach dir.
And a
Hartstigen
dank
Dank.
allemaal voor kommenheid.
Yes, and yeah, thanks to everyone for joining us today. And for any unanswered questions, we'll make sure Diana can receive those. So thank you so much, everyone. Seid gesund. Seid gesund.
Gesund.